We live in a time where society has become so numb to God that people are trying to figure out things their own way and trying to make themselves their own God. Because to them, if there is a God, then the world is kind of messed up, and why wouldn't he just come? Two things about God's character that I've noticed, actually more so the nature of God, which there's a difference between the nature of God and the character of God. And the nature of God is that when there's a cry for help or where there is injustice, he's a God of justice and righteousness. And where there is severe injustice and there's a cry for help, he sends someone. He raises someone up and he sends someone. And fun fact, it's not always a Christian that he sends, but that's a conversation for another day. So as I was reading through Matthew 7 and landed on the section of verses 24 through to 28, I'll just read it really quickly. Therefore, actually, let me read it from 26. Everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who builds his house on the sand. What's the foolish man like, you may ask? Well, the rain comes down and the floods come and the winds blow and beats on the house and it falls. And great was its fall. Thankfully, the Bible wasn't just written for us in 2023. And so what the Lord is saying here is that he's been speaking forever. He has been speaking forever and given persons an opportunity to hear his words, heed to his teaching, follow him, and do what he says to do. Not in this do as I say type of way, but it's a leading, right? So he's like, if you hear these teachings, if you come across these words, if you've been under the sound of a prophet that was sent by God, if you have been in an atmosphere that fosters, communion with the Holy Spirit, and you decide to go against it, then woe be unto you. It is consequence. So there are consequences to everything. If you decide not to heed to these words, to his teaching, not to follow him, not to obey, if you decide to do things your own way, if you decide that to be traditional or culturally conscious, if you decide to follow crowd, if you decide that this makes more sense to you than what your life makes more sense to you than what he's saying, then there are consequences. You know what I mean? If I have a knife, and the instruction of this knife is to cut through things, right? And I'm like, I don't think so. I could probably use this knife to comb my hair as well. So this looks like something I can get through the naps. And I do this with the knife and I cut myself. And then I say, oh, curse God. He's a bad God. What kind of God would create something that lets me cut myself? It's not, that wasn't its use. When the Bible talks about renewing your mind, you're able to read it with a different level of understanding. So when I read the Bible, I see it less as this do's and don'ts, but very much this follow me and this is how life will be for you. And as much as there is suffering attached to it, suffering is inevitable because we live in a fallen world. Again, a whole nother conversation, but for the sake of this particular video, before he says what will happen to the person who doesn't listen, it says, whoever hears these saying and does them, I will liken them to a wise man who builds his house on a rock. The rains will fall, the floods would come, the winds would blow and beat on the house, and it will not fall, for it was founded on the rock. So baby, the choice is yours. You can either be wise, listen, take heed, hear, respond with diligence and obedience, or you can decide not to listen and be the foolish man. So when there is destruction, when there is things that are happening, it takes you too. It takes your household. It could take your children. I'm not wishing any bad on anybody. Let me just wrap up here. What I'm saying is there are consequences and we don't know how the chips fall. So you best be on the side of the wise man. That's all.